Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. There are now 500 of you who are subbed to this channel, and if you're not, go ahead and subscribe. And I thought to celebrate, I've seen it's pretty common to do a Q&A video once people hit 500 subscribers, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I've got some coffee in a very chipped Totoro cup to drink. So let's get to the questions. How did you end up writing at all? Was this a thing you've always wanted to do? Yes, I have always wanted to be a writer since as long as I could remember. When I was like first learning to make letters on a page, I was writing little books. I always loved to read, and being an author was always something that was on my list of things I wanted to be when I grew up. I started to get serious about it in high school. I had a really amazing opportunity to go to an arts boarding school for my senior year for a creative writing program. That was really cool. And then in college, I started out majoring in environmental science and ended up switching to English and creative writing. And now I'm kind of trying to merge both those interests by writing fiction about climate change. Question number 2 is, have you ever thought about writing a trilogy? My YA novel that's hopefully going on sub this year, Sand and Swarm, was originally conceived as the start of a trilogy. But after I wrote the first draft of the book and I revised it, I ended up feeling like there wasn't enough plot and intrigue, so I kind of put half the plot of what I had planned out as the second book into the first book. So now I'm thinking that that will be the first in a duology. I'll probably write, if the book sells, it would sell as a duo, and then I would write the second book in that series. Question number 3. What character that you've written is the most like you? So all of my protagonists contain aspects of myself, obviously. But I was thinking about this, and the character that contains most of my flaws is Rilla from Sand and Swarm. Sand and Swarm is a pretty funny book. Rilla is, I think, a funny protagonist. She gets herself into a lot of scrapes because of flaws that we both share. She has a tendency to put her foot in her mouth. She has a tendency to speak before really thinking something through. She has a short temper. She has a bit of a savior complex that gets her into trouble. And she kind of learns and grows and moves past these things over the course of the book. But yeah, Rilla, I kind of took my biggest flaws and exaggerated them a bit in coming up with that character. Going along with that question, someone asked, what character or antagonist have you written that you would absolutely despise if they were real? My villains I was thinking about are all also based on real people that I've encountered. In Depart, my book that's coming out this year, there's an Officer Pulaski in it who's a cop, and he's based on this cop that I have always see at protests in Houston. And I never notice or remember any of the other cops, but there's this one cop. He's got a blonde flat top, and he's got the build of a linebacker turned alcoholic, and he just oozes cruelty, this guy. And he shows up to protest. When we were protesting the detention center here, the juvenile detention center for immigrant teenagers on Emancipation Drive, I was going with the Never Again Action, which is a Jewish-led activist group trying to protest against the immigration internment camps and detention centers and baby jails. And we were going out there every few days to protest, and this cop was always there with this shit-eating grin on his face, and you could just tell that he's a cop for all the wrong reasons, or maybe all the right reasons, if you know what policing's really for. I don't know, his face just kind of haunts me. I mean, he was always, here we were, protesting against locking up kids in cages, and he's just there with this smug little grin on his pig face, and I had him in mind when I created the character of Pulaski, Officer Pulaski in Depart. There's a reason that cop behaves the way he does in that story. Question number 5 is, where should I look for sensitivity readers, and when during the writing process do I hire them? I don't know if I'm the expert on this. My personal experience with sensitivity readers, so I wrote Depart, and the main character is a trans guy. Was very much writing from a place of figuring out my own dysphoria, and in a way I wrote Noah to figure out am I a trans man? Noah's dysphoria, I felt I could render accurately because it was coming from a very personal place. But when it comes to the lived experiences of someone who's embarking on medical transition, I didn't know those things, and so I knew I would need to check with someone. I kind of lucked out because I, as always, when I write a story, I ask for beta readers just on Twitter because I like to see how just random people will respond to a story. Someone who wanted to be a beta reader was a trans guy and had amazing feedback, gave me lots of really great like developmental edits, and really helped me find the emotional heart of the story. But he also knew very nitty-gritty things about being a trans guy that I wouldn't know, and caught those really small things, just like how many months Noah had been on T, he would have had these changes, etc. So I was really grateful for that. And I decided to ask him to be my sensitivity reader and see if he would be willing to do that. And I offered to pay him. I wanted him to be able to like go through a couple developmental edits with me. But he ended up saying that he would prefer, rather than being paid, he'd prefer that I be his critique partner on, future projects that he was working on. So now me and him go back and forth. He can send me anything for all time, and I will always be willing to read it very keenly and give him lots of feedback on it. So I've, helped him out with 2 stories and an article since we, made this partnership. So that worked out really well. But, that idea came from him. The idea of being a critique partner, I initially offered to pay him, and I want to stress that I think that that's important. Like, writers should not be approaching sensitivity readers asking if they want to just like trade labor. Like, you should always up front offer to compensate them financially for their work. If they have another plan in mind, like, then I think that's fine. I think for writers to like trade editorial services can work out great, but only if like both parties are definitely all about that. What advice do you have for writers that are just starting out in the industry that you've not seen anyone point out yet? I would say if you're new, we focus a lot on like telling stories, but I always have wanted to just tell a story that has a point of view. I think we don't tell young writers enough that you need to figure out your point of view. You need to like, in a way, like work on your politics and kind of think about you have to figure out, why is my point of view valuable to the world and to like discourse generally? You got to unpack your life experiences. You probably got to go to therapy. You got to think about what were the unique sort of privileges and hardships. What was that intersection of like society and privilege and experiences and challenges that made your life unique? And then you have to learn about yourself and do some therapy to work through some things and like, really figure out what were the key formative experiences of your life. And then you also have to learn about the world and think about how your experiences plug into a society that you live in. And when you can do both of those things, when you learn about the world and you learn about yourself, then you figure out what your point of view is. And no matter what you're writing, it's important to have a carefully considered point of view. Otherwise, you might find yourself writing something that's on the wrong side of history. Or you might find yourself writing something that's just fluff and patched together tropes that you've seen other people doing, and there won't be anything original about your voice. So yeah, I would say figure out your point of view, figure out yourself, figure out your own life story. I'm not saying you have to write your life story, like you don't need to write a memoir, but you need to figure out how your life story has shaped you as a person. And then you need to understand the society and your place in the society that you've grown up in. So reading nonfiction, reading more about the world. If you went to school and you studied in a certain field, bringing like specialized knowledge into fiction can really enrich it. So for me, like it was like I had those couple semesters of like trying to be an environmental science major and a lifelong passion towards environmental science. And I've infused that into my writing by writing cli-fi. And that is the urgent heart of all of my stories. Okay, question number 7. How have recent events changed your writing? Hoo boy. Well, first of all, to be quite honest, I haven't really written anything since pandemic started, since lockdown. I used to always write when I was away from my child, and I'm now never away from my child. I have a 3-year-old. It makes it very difficult to write. Right now she's watching Frozen, which is why I can be in here doing this. This little office slash closet, it's also my closet. This room is far enough away that I can seem to shoot YouTube videos, but I haven't seemed to be able to sit here and write. I never know when sometimes yesterday I was sitting down to write. I'm trying to do NaNoWriMo this year. NaNoWriMo, sorry, I know, I say it wrong. I got like 500 words written and she came knocking at the door wanting a snack, and then I got kind of sucked out there and more things came up and I just never got back to writing over the course of the day. So the main way it has impacted my writing is that I am not any longer writing. Like, she doesn't go to daycare, obviously. I'm home with her all day. Even before we sent her to daycare, I homeschooled her for 2 years, or I was just home with her for 2 years. I was just like a stay-home parent for 2 years. And I wrote a book in that time, but I would write it when my husband would come home from work, and then I would go to a coffee shop. I would leave the house and he'd watch her for a couple hours so I could write there. Or on the weekends, I would just go to the coffee shop and be gone all morning. There's nowhere I can go now to write. Like, it's Houston, I can't go outside and write. Like, it's 90 degrees, it's July. There's no coffee shops, there's no libraries, there's nowhere I can go to get away and have some like extended peace and quiet where I know I won't get interrupted to get sucked into a story. And so I haven't been able to get anything done. And it is eating away at my sense of self-worth, for sure. It is really hard to not be producing writing on my mental health. So I'm trying to be easy on myself and be like, these are challenging times. This isn't forever. You'll get back to writing someday. But there's a lot of negative self-talk happening. Also, I'm a speculative fiction writer. And so I normally write like very near future sci-fi. I'm usually trying to think, like, most of my stories are set like 30 to 50 to 75 years in the future. I did a lot of research when I started getting into this genre of writing on climate change forecasts and on like technology developed forecasts, and kind of thinking about how those things would shape the future. And then this pandemic hit. The pandemic I did not see coming. The pandemic I did not at all foresee the way this is playing out. And every week some shit's going on with the pandemic that I could not have seen the week before. And so it's kind of shaken my ability to feel like I can foresee the future, and I have to sort of reprocess what pandemic culture, how long is this going to last? How is this going to shape future events? Are more pandemics to come? So I feel like I'm still processing that. And then with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, most people who know me in my life consider me politically radical, but I've become more politically radical in the last few weeks, and I've been reading people further to the left of me and reading more abolitionist work. And that's been challenging my politics in a great way, to where I feel like, all my writing has been leftist, has been critical of capitalism and the elites and inequality, injustice, racial inequality. Like, those themes have been present in what I've been writing, but like, I want to go further. So that's something that's been exciting me. But all of this upheaval is just like a lot to process. And going back to what I was saying about needing to know who you are and what your place is in society and have a point of view. Like, I feel like those things for me are evolving right now, because they're probably evolving for everybody and they're evolving for the whole world. And so I'm trying to go easy on myself and be like, I'm processing these things. I'll figure out my point of view and I'll get to writing later. Also, though, I signed up for NaNoWriMo, and I am really gonna try to write this month. So this is the month I try to get back to it. The second question really leads into it. Juggling mom life and writing life, doing all the things. How do you balance everything? Not well currently, obviously. In the pandemic, I haven't been able to write anything. I've been able to do some book promotion stuff, and I've been able to start this YouTube channel because this is something I can come in and film for like 15-20 minutes and then get back to childcare. Part of the reason that's possible is because my sister-in-law and her kids have been living here with us. So we're actually like 3 parents and 3 kids in this house. It's very tight quarters. It's a 2-bedroom house, but we're able to like split childcare more between us. And that's helped me to be a little bit more productive during the pandemic than I would have been otherwise. Because I think it was just me and my daughter alone here, because my husband goes to work during the day. If it was just me and her alone, like I would have gotten nothing done, like nothing at all. It's not possible right now. There are people who have kids and jobs and write, and I don't know how they do it. Like, that's amazing. When I was a teacher, I never wrote anything. Question number 9, opinion on Shakespeare. Do you think his stuff needs to be focused on in schools as it is? The part of that I would go with is as it is. No. I think the entire like Western canon, all the texts that we teach traditionally in schools need to be challenged. We should be reading far more works by Black authors, Indigenous authors, Latinx authors. Like, books, our curriculum should reflect the diversity of this country. School age curriculum should highlight marginalized voices and uplift marginalized voices. We should be making a concerted effort to ensure that kids are reading books by people who are very different from them. I would like to see queer literature starting to be included in schools. So I think Shakespeare takes up entirely too much of the curriculum. I think reading one Shakespeare play in high school is perfectly fine. This hero, I love Shakespeare. Doing the ASMR series, unpacking the Shakespearean sonnets, I think it's so much fun to analyze Shakespearean lit. I think it'd be cool for larger high schools to offer Shakespeare as like an elective course, like a semester-long elective of reading Shakespeare if you want to. But the idea that kids need to read a Shakespeare play every year in order to be well-rounded individuals, I'd rather they read Shakespeare one year and Toni Morrison the next, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez the next. International literature. Kids should be reading books from authors around the world. Big fan of Shakespeare. No, it doesn't need to be focused on as it is. We can do with less Shakespeare and make room for more diversity in our curriculum. Number 10, favorite book I've read recently. Currently, I'm reading a book called Futures of Black Radicalism, which I don't often read nonfiction, but I'm finding it very energizing, and it kind of what I was saying before about how I'm reading radicalism. I'm becoming more radical in my politics. I'm working on my point of view. That's a nonfiction book that's really challenging me, and I think is gonna do good things for my writing, because again, I'm working on that point of view, more aware of the forces at work in our society, and when you can put that into fiction, you come up with much more interesting stories. In terms of a fiction book I've really enjoyed recently, just watch my booktube channel because I've been talking about them. Number 11, what's a common misconception people have about you? I come off on the internet and also in life and in professional settings as very aggressive. I think people think that I'm cold when they don't know me very well, and I'm actually incredibly like loving and warm fuzzy feelings with my family. When it comes to my friends, I'm a total ride or die friend. So I think people would be surprised by how warm and loving I can be, since that's not my like public persona at all. But yeah, I'm like super affectionate with my daughter and my spouse. I'm very guarded about who I let into my life, but once you are in my sort of inner circle, like I'm ride or die for you forever. And I have really long-term friendships that I have maintained even when people move away, and you know, now they're across the country. Like, we stay in touch because those relationships, once you're like close to me, you're really, really important to me, and I really cherish those friendships. Question number 12, are you the mayor in SimCity? Yes. So yeah. Question number 13, what is your go-to Whataburger order? So for those of you who aren't in Texas, we have a fast food chain here called Whataburger that people are very proud about in almost like a patriotic way. First of all, it's a fast food chain, factory farming, a huge generator of like plastic waste and commercial agriculture, like big ag, like it's all evil shit. Like, so I don't have some like super duper Whataburger stand pride or whatever, but every 6 months or so I'll end up going to Whataburger. I do not eat red meat as a rule. Usually when I go to Whataburger, I'm getting breakfast. because it's like we're on a road trip, or we're like driving back from camping or something, and it's like the only place we have to stop. If I have to like choose a fast food place, I will usually choose Whataburger. I like the egg sandwich. This is just like egg and cheese on a jalapeno cheddar biscuit. That's usually what I want to order. The jalapeno cheddar biscuits are really good. Okay, question number 14. I'm so excited to talk about this one. If you're comfortable, I'd love to hear about parenting as Enby. Your thoughts on giving genders to your spawn, if you call yourself mom, dad, Rennie, or something else. Yeah. So I was already a mom when I just figured out that I was non-binary. In fact, it was the experience of pregnancy and breastfeeding that made my gender dysphoria that I'd always experienced like way more intense. Being pregnant, the maternity clothes are very feminine. I wasn't able to really find any maternity clothes that were comfortable on me at all. I hated the way people treat you changes, and you're infantilized and feminized a lot when you're pregnant. Breastfeeding was like a really conflicted experience for me. I was getting in touch with the fact that I do have dysphoria around my breasts, but at the same time, breastfeeding was like a really intimate connection with my daughter, and it was something I felt like I could do with her. I had a really traumatic birth, and I was disabled and bedridden for months after she was born. There wasn't a lot I could do for her. I couldn't get up to change a diaper for months. And so breastfeeding was like the only thing I could do for her. It made me feel useful. It was kind of I ended up losing my job because of that. And so at this time where like my identity was really being shattered, like breastfeeding was in some ways the only way I felt productive, and yet also it was the source of dysphoria. What was I talking about? Oh, parenting as Enby. I came out when my daughter was over a year old, and so she had already started calling me mama. And it had never made me feel bad. I've always had like horrible feelings about the word wife. I was actually in a band called Wife when I was like 21, because when people would ask, why is your band called Wife? I would say, because it's like the scariest word in the English language. It's like I've always hated the word wife, even before I was a wife. My husband's not allowed to call me that anymore. Felt that cringe whenever I was referred to as girl or lady or ma'am or woman. Certain female coded words hit harder than others. But when my daughter started calling me mama, there was nothing but joy there. And I think it's because for my daughter, who's the only person who's ever called me that, there was no gender behind it, because she started calling me that before there was any concept of gender in her mind. So for me, mama wasn't coded female, just like personally speaking. I loved being her mom. When she started calling me mom, that's when she started talking. It was the first word she ever said. It was really exciting. So I never felt like I wanted to give up that word. So yeah, I'm still her mom, and I think I'll always go by mom. When it came to like making the decision, because it's always a decision, to assign our daughter female at birth, this was something that I wrestled with. And this was even before I had come out to myself as non-binary, but I had a lot of non-binary friends and trans-binary friends, and like, so definitely the idea of like, oh, okay, we're gonna raise our daughter like AFAB, it was something that I thought about and processed. It's like, if I was gonna try to raise her like gender neutral, as I'm seeing some people starting to do, you're making a choice about their gender just as much as you would making a choice about them being AFAB or AMAB. And we live in Texas. Like, if we lived in New York City or Portland or somewhere very liberal where we could know that her daycare would be supportive and her grandparents would be supportive, and random kids she meets at the playground would be supportive, it would be a very different thing. But we live in Texas, and like, my husband's parents are very conservative. Daycares tend to be conservative. I didn't want to set up a child to be fighting some kind of gender battles before she even knows what gender is. And so we decided to choose the path of least resistance. And if she ends up growing up to feel like she's not AFAB, she's always gonna know that that's totally okay. I mean, she's growing up in a house with two non-binary people, me and my nephew, who goes by they, them as well. So I think Momo's gonna grow up totally understanding that like gender's a choice, and you're gonna get to at some point, or not gender's a choice, like you can choose how you feel inside, but you can definitely choose how you want to live. And she'll always know that if she wants to change her gender markers or pronouns, if she ends up being trans, like this is gonna be a very inclusive home for her. And while we use female pronouns for her, again, just like with the grandparents and the daycare situation, it really seemed like the only option. We do try to raise her gender everything. So what makes me kind of sad is when people, I think in the name of trying to raise their kid gender neutral, they just end up raising kids masc. They're like eschewing feminine things for their kids. And that's misogyny, right? Like there's nothing wrong with the colors pink and purple. That's the whole thing. Like there's nothing wrong with dresses. And so it really makes me sad when I see people raising AFAB kids masc in the name of feminism or in the name of trans inclusion. And yet it really seems to me like what they're communicating is misogyny, because there's nothing sparkly, there's nothing frilly, there's nothing feminine. So we're trying to raise Momo gender everything. So that means feminine, she's got super feminine unicorn princess dresses, and she's got masc, clothes from the boys section with a truck on it or whatever. In terms of toys, dolls are important. They teach like nurturing and caregiving and empathy. So she's got dolls, and we try to make them like multicultural dolls and not super sexualized dolls. And she's also got, dinosaurs and trucks and cars, and even though I'm like those are all like fossil fuel based things, which is what I don't love about them, but lots of building blocks. I think the toys that I like best are open-ended play toys. So a lot of dress up toys. She's got like a vet kit, and construction worker kit is a lot of fun. She's got the construction worker with the tool belt and all the little tools, and she really loves that, and scientist kits. And I don't think that those things are gender, although the toolbox obviously would be considered like a mask-coded toy. But yeah, we just try to make sure that she has all kinds of gendered materials at her disposal, and she plays with all of them equally. I think when you present those things to kids without pushing them in one direction, they're going to be interested in all of them, regardless of what their genitalia is, obviously. I do think that kids who are provided with a wide array of clothes are going to tend to enjoy feminine, the girl clothes more. And I've seen this with a little boy I know who's AMAB, but his mom is very much trying to raise him gender everything as well. And he loves wearing rainbow dresses because rainbow dresses are fucking fun, and kids' clothes for boys are very boring and sad and colorless and joyless. And so, I think that Momo definitely does lean more into the girly feminine clothes, but I kind of think that's just because they're more joyful. So yeah, I think that with parenting, as we're figuring out gender and as non-binary parents are figuring out, how they want to parent, I think it depends on your location, what's safe for you and your kid, how publicly you want to be about your gender. I think that as long as kids are going to know from a young age that trans people exist and are valid and are here, if they ever, come out as trans, they will be totally embraced and loved without consequences. Then I think that's like the best we could do in my situation. Yeah, I'm a mom and I'm cool with always being mom, but my daughter's the only person who gets to call me mom. And for us, like between me and her, it's like not a gender term. And the last question is, what are the kids' books that you or your kid love? And I'm gonna do just a whole nother video on that. I did a picture book review recently for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I love picture books, and we have a ton of picture books in this house, and so I'll be doing more picture book reviews soon. So yeah, thanks for your questions. This video ended up being kind of long, but I had fun talking about everything. And if you haven't already, please sub to my channel and help me get another 500 of you so that hopefully I can get to 1,000 someday. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, buy my book. I'll have a link in the description to do that. All right, take care. Bye.